Hello, everybody. This is Jan Moray and my guest, Mona Duncan.
Your guest?
my co-host, my co-host, Mona Duncan. Thanks for setting me straight there. For our weekly, I'm really out of cahoots here, our weekly Greet the Week. So today we're going to talk about something called radical truthfulness. It's a term that I ran across this past week listening to my podcast. And wouldn't it be interesting if we could tell people what was really on our mind without thinking about offending them? Because sometimes you get into conversations and you really want to tell somebody something, but you're afraid to say it, and you don't. And then sometimes later on they'll come back and say, I wish you would have told me. And so I'm just thinking, well, what would it take to have conversations with people where you felt comfortable to be able to say whatever was on your mind? You ever thought about that, Mona?
Well, yes, I have, as a matter of fact. And I love it, because I'm pretty upfront,
Mm-hmm.
and it's asking for permission because not everyone's willing to give it.
Correct.
And in the military, which, I have family members that have been and are and love the program JAG and NCIS, and they're always asking permission to speak.
Okay.
And if they give permission to speak, because just that very phrase is going to your commanding officer or to whomever, that very phrase is saying, I'm wanting to say something that's not apparently in keeping with what I think you're thinking.
Uh-huh.
And so they get the person's permission, permission to speak freely. I think that's added to it, permission to speak freely. And then, no, I don't agree with that plan, or I was thinking this or something else. And then the person that has given the permission to speak freely, they're still the one that's in charge or in control. And whether they give in to say, yes, go with that, or no, it'll be the original strategy or whatever. It's just that permission. And then also in court documents, they'll say, well, it's dismissed with prejudice, meaning that I don't like the fact that it was voted down. And and again, it will come back, in the court documents and so forth. Your objection is duly noted.
Uh-huh.
It's on record. It's on record.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do need to have that in relationships and in families and in, just to, we need to duly put on record the fact that.
Yeah, and one of the things that they talked about is to do this is you really have to set up some principles that you guide your life by, where we're going to be honest, we're not going to be hurtful, we're going to say it in a respectful way, and so you have some guidelines as to how to bring it forward. And then I guess your tone of voice, to make sure you're talking calmly and communicating this so that the person really understands that the intent is to help and not to hurt. Or when somebody really disagrees with you, to be able to express an opposing thought or opposing position without fear of being criticized or ridiculed or whatever, because it's because then you close up, and that's the thing that I was thinking about here. When you're dealing with adolescents and they're starting to get their own thoughts and explore different things, but then some don't feel safe about talking about those things at home because, oh, Dad's really going to get upset at me if I talk about this political view, and then you don't have those conversations, and it results in the families kind of pulling apart because they're not comfortable talking about it. And so that's something that was big for me, because like when my kids were growing up, I kept telling them, I just want you to be honest with me. I want to know what's going on, because if you're not talking to me about it, you're probably going to talk to somebody else who may not care about you as much as I do, may not care much about your well-being. And I just wonder if we had more of that, if we had fewer children who got into trouble.
Well, but it's like any kind of legislation that you can't just, You can't just put it out there. It's something that has to be practiced and put
Oh,
into effect, and
absolutely.
something that has to be within the individual person, whether the others are around or not, in keeping with that anyway. And it's also in that radical truthfulness is being radically truthful with yourself, that maybe in trying to get this person to be more truthful, I'm really clamping them down, because maybe they have received so much criticism and so much misunderstanding that they're not willing to open to anyone. And
Mm-hmm.
it goes back to building a relationship.
Yeah.
Of let's have a soda pop together. Let's just sit out and not talk about anything in particular and just get to know one another.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you have to develop that relationship beforehand. You can't just say one day, well, from
Right.
now on, we're going to say whatever we want. Because usually the day that you say that is because you got something on your mind that you want to tell the other person. And then tomorrow we'll forget about that.
Right.
We want to make sure that we are developing those relationships with our families so that they do feel safe talking about whatever's on their mind, even if they know that it's something you're not going to like.
Yeah. And being safe. What do you mean by being safe?
Well, that you're not going to punish me, or you're not going to go tell the whole world what I'm thinking, or maybe go tell this other person that I'm feeling this way about. That you're going to keep whatever they say just between you, and not go and bring other people in or let everybody know what's on their mind.
Now, what about safe as in I know you'll care about me and love me and hold me in high
Well,
regard,
that too. Yeah.
regardless of what I dump on you.
Right.
Whether I'm dumping about someone else, whether I'm dumping about me, or whether I'm dumping about what I think about you.
Yeah. That I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to care about you.
Yeah.
I may hurt that. I may not enjoy hearing that, but I care for you enough to appreciate that your honesty, because that is difficult to say something like that.
And also in those times, even though that, it is, may I have permission to speak freely, and it's given and you speak freely, and there's that tension there.
Yeah.
It's to realize that it takes a lot of maturity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's to realize that give a little space here, it's still holding in high regard. Give a little space here, and then, just think about it. Just think about it.
Yeah.
And maybe as we look at it later, when we're not in that emotional unsafeness, that we can think about it and realize that, maybe I do resemble those remarks.
Yeah, that's true. When the subject is first brought up, you may not be in a place to talk about it because it brings up so much discomfort, and then you'd be able to say, I can't talk about this right now. Give me some time and we'll address it at a later date, but then go back and bring it up.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the things we hear, they are difficult to hear, and I might become real defensive at first and not really listen.
Yeah. And what about examples? Do you have any examples to?
Well, I can think of, when I was in the workforce and had a different view from somebody else, and brought that up and brought up my objections to doing it, and people just didn't want to hear it, and I try to tell them, well, I think this decision is wrong, for these reasons, and it's not going to work out, and I was just trying to bring up some objections, and I got accused of not being a team player because I wasn't 100% behind it. And as it turned out, it didn't work out. But sometimes you feel bad about bringing something up, because everyone's all excited about moving forward. But if there's some reason that you think that it's not exactly right, then you should be heard. And doesn't mean
At least considered.
At least considered. It doesn't mean that you're telling everybody, oh, you're wrong, you're stupid, this is never going to work. But hey, I have a little different perspective on it because I come from a little different background than what you come from. But
And then, so let's just using that same scenario that you're talking about. And so the project is not quite as successful as it could have been had, a coworker's views been acknowledged and, kind of put into place. And so that's realized, oh, well, wait, maybe that crazy lady did have.
Yeah.
And so maybe, what about that little, so then it's begun to look, how do you handle whether or not you receive acknowledgement that it was your idea?
Oh, well, it's always nice to be acknowledged that it was your idea and you're the one who brought it up to begin with, but that doesn't always happen. I had to change my mindset and just be grateful that they did come to that realization, whether I got the credit for it or not.
Exactly.
Because you don't always get the credit for the things that you do, but that you do get heard. And sometimes it's difficult for people to acknowledge that you did bring it up. In fact, I do have a funny story about that. There was years ago, we were in a heated argument about some product that was defective in the field, and I was asking all these questions. I was a quality manager at the time, and I was asking all these questions, and I said, something's changed in the process, something's changed. They said, no, nothing changed, everything's the same, which was always the answer. No, nothing's changed. And several years later, we were in another conversation with a couple of the same people, and they were talking about that instance, where this thing, happened, and they eventually found that something had changed, and they came across it just accidentally. And I said, yeah, didn't I tell you that something had changed? And the guy looked at me and he said, yeah, you did. You were the one.
It was you.
It was me. But he had totally erased that from his mind. It never came, because it was, months later when they discovered it, and I'm sure our argument had been long forgotten. And then all of a sudden they did find a reason, but that, and that goes to, that's why you bring people from different disciplines in, because they do have different points of view that they're looking at things. When you're so involved in a product or in anything, you're too close to it and you don't see it from the different perspectives of other people and people who are a little farther removed from it. And so that's always a good practice, is to have people with dissenting views. Because like the first example I was giving, everybody just kind of followed the leader. And it's like, oh, this is what he says we got to do, so let's get behind him. We're getting behind him to move forward instead of questioning, is this really the best move for the business? And it's good to have those people to kind of raise their hand and say, hey, maybe we ought to think about this a little bit. They eventually came to that conclusion, but it was months later. They could have done work over a few weeks' time to do a little more investigation and found out. And I don't think a whole lot of money was wasted in this particular case, but it can be. You going down this road and spending all these resources just to find that it's not going to work out. Whereas if you had heeded this caution that somebody brought up, maybe you could have diverted all the work into something more beneficial.
Mm-hmm. But in all of this, and looking at it from both sides, you giving the information and then later someone recognizing that you gave the information.
Yeah.
It really goes back to a very, very plain, simple tenet of Dr. Glasser's, is that all we can do is give information. All we can do is receive information. But how do we give it and how do we receive it? So in the giving it, if I am the yeah, it's probably not going to be as well received.
Correct.
But then also, am I receiving it? Nah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even though we may receive it, because we receive information, we don't even know how we receive it. Someone may have said it, we may have heard it, we may have thought it went over our head, but it really sunk in.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got information from them. I know one day, well, we've spoken before that I work with the federal prisoners, and had this 9-week class, and we do a lot of talking and discussing and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, so several years later, I was shopping, and I met this person, and I said, "How you doing?" And he came up, and usually I pretend that I know everybody, whether I know them or not, because I don't always remember.
Oh.
In the past. Anyway, he came up to me and was telling me, I said, "Well, how are things going for you?" And he said, "It's going really good." And he was telling me about some changes made. And he just startled, and he said, "You know what?" He said, "I thought that was me, but that was you in my head talking to me."
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yes, and I did appreciate that. But you know what? It took several years for him to realize that.
Yeah.
That he had heard something that resonated, but at the time, I agree, but I'm not about to agree because I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet.
You're not there. Exactly. And you may not remember who said it. And I can remember being offended at other people getting credit for something that I said. But sometimes you're not ready to receive it, and you're getting information from all different places you don't remember. It's not that you're being against this person, I don't want to give this person credit, is you really don't remember who it is until you say something, you phrase things in a certain way that it clicks. And it sounds like that's what he did with you. It just says, Mona is the one who
Right. That's the one that drilled that into me for 9 weeks.
Yeah.
and then I know for myself personally, there's a tenet that I teach that I'm just so positive was, mine originally, that it was just this divine revelation. And to a large degree it was because, well, anyway, what I'm saying is that I was reading a book, and there it was, and it was talking about, one of Francis of Assisi that had come up with this. And I'm thinking, well, apparently I picked it up in its infancy form, and it developed with my personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, going back to the wisest man that ever was, King Solomon. He said, "There's nothing new under the sun."
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun. We now have all of this technology, but you know what? The workings of it was there. We, as people, had not received enough information about how wave and energy and all that kind of stuff works that we were able to put it together. And it's the same thing with all kinds of information.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and you may think it's your idea, but any idea you have, you started thinking about it from who knows what somebody said and
Exactly.
how long ago it started.
Exactly. And everything is a seed. It's a seed. It's a seed.
Yes.
And it may have been a seed. And the thing of it is that seed may have been forced into a non-fertile ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we didn't get it until much, much later.
Right.
Because we weren't receptive to it, and it was just crammed in.
Yeah. And we weren't ready to listen to it. We hadn't lived long enough. We didn't have enough life experience for it to be meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we can read something, watch it, and it makes sense. Oh yeah, that sounds so good. And a lot of things sound good on paper.
Yeah.
But the working out of it is, it's like, you can change your mind. I can't. You can't change your emotions. I can't.
Or a lot of things make sense in your head, and then once you write it out, it doesn't make sense anymore.
Right. So there's just so many variables, and it's being open to receiving that information, and if nothing else, just kind of storing it.
Yeah.
To see where it might fit.
And so it is nice to have somebody who can say, "Oh, Mona, what were you thinking? Have you thought about this aspect of it? Have you thought about how it would be applied here?" And it's even though we don't like to hear that, we want everyone to say we're so brilliant and everything we do is so wonderful. But it's better to know that stuff early on so we can kind of tweak it a little bit.
And it's that constant self-evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bottom line is we are free will individuals.
Yeah.
And it does not matter how truthful someone is with us, and they may be 100% right on as to how we are messing up our own life or all this kind of stuff, or go this direction or whatever. And unless we decide that that's what we're going to do, we may hear it, but we're not acting on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and going back to the adolescence example, with parents and children being open with each other, and the parents giving the message of what they feel is right for the child, not forcing the child to do it, but saying how they think would be better to live their lives, but then to constantly provide support for them. Because if a kid has something in their mind that they want to try something, or they want to hang out with these kids, and they know that they're not good examples, but to allow them the freedom to do that, knowing that if they run into trouble, they can always call for help and somebody will be there for them.
Yeah, definitely that. Or, call a cab and I'll pay for it when you get
Correct.
home. That kind of stuff. Definitely. That I'm your heavy. I'm on your side, and it's okay to tell them, "Boy, I can't do that. My dad'd kill me," or whatever. It's okay.
Right. Because I think the thing with my dad will kill me. So how many kids have kept things to themselves because they are afraid?
Exactly.
To bring it up to their families.
Right. And it's having that faith and that trust there.
Yeah.
So that you can communicate that, and things will be okay.
Right.
I had a lady telling me one time that something she couldn't tell her husband couldn't do, he'd kill me. And I said, "Do you really believe that?"
Yeah.
And the bottom line was she didn't really believe that, but there was that fear factor there. There was that unsafeness there.
Yeah.
And maybe even physical harm. And, since you're aware of that, we need to set some boundaries. But sometimes we have a small fear and we take it to the extreme as to how horrible it would be. And,
or it could be that we're just not comfortable saying it, so let's put the blame on the other person because he's not going to receive it well, so I'm not even going to try.
Right. And I think of that just with my mother and I. We had this, well, I don't know if I should say I should say I had an adversarial relationship with her. But anyway, we were, maybe because we were too much alike,
Yeah.
It was kind of, don't tell me what to do, and I was always being told what to do, and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, one time, and I was about 16 at the time, I think, and I don't remember what the incident was, but I was just really angry, and I went into my room and I slammed the door. And the general acting out of it would have been marching right in, even though I'd slammed the door, and demanding that I come back out and talk about it, and demanding that I shut the door nicely, and this kind of stuff. And anyway, so I went in, I slammed the door, and I went in, and I sat down on the bed because I knew what was happening, and I was ready for the fight, when I was going to be forced to. And Mother didn't come bounding in the door.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
I know. How dare her be out of character?
I know. She's supposed to do that because I'm ready for my next step, right?
I know. I've already got it planned out. I know what I'm going to say and do, and the kind of attitude I'm giving, and anyway, and so I sat there, and it's like you're waiting for the other foot to drop, the other shoe to drop, and I don't know how long it took, but it seemed like a long time. And then I heard this little rap on the door. Didn't open, didn't force itself in, just this little rap on the door. And I didn't answer it. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, what's going on? And I heard the doorknob open real slow, and she barely opened it. And she said, "When you calm down, why don't you come in, we'll talk about
it." Okay.
What?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I didn't have anything to be mad about.
Because she didn't do it. She didn't respond the way I wanted her to.
I know the very idea. I don't know how to handle this. And but I couldn't let her get too much of an upper hand. So I remember deliberately waiting a while.
Okay, right.
To go on in. You still have to be there. And if we could just realize about our kids, or about our maid, or about our co-workers, or they have to keep their dignity somehow, some way.
Yeah, right. And we have to allow that.
We have to allow that.
Yeah.
We have
because
to.
once you start fighting them on that, then you're just never going to find common ground. They're going to find more things to get upset at you about, and you're going to be more angry about.
Right. And that instant right there, I can see as a major turning point in Mother and my relationship.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Wow.
she died too young for us, and I was still too immature for it to have. But I can look back on those remaining 3 years that it was constantly improving.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if she, read about being radically truthful, or if she had, watched a soap opera and someone handled it that way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whether she had heard a sermon, whether a friend had taught her, I have no idea.
Or read a book.
But I know as Mother changed in her approach to me, my approach to her changed, and I couldn't be ugly again.
Right. That's the key. That's the thing that people don't understand. It's both of you. It's both people.
Not just one.
Right.
It's just like going back to the mechanics of everything. Every machine, everything works perfectly for the results it produces.
Yeah, right.
And so, this against this again, it was working perfectly for what it was producing, which was more and more betting.
Having that wedge between the two of you.
Exactly. It was getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And so just that little tap on the door, now as I think about it, like, here's the wedge in the rock that's breaking it down. As I think about it, it was just like the little bitty tap from the bottom that was beginning to take that wedge out.
Yeah. It's a good
and it didn't, if you put a nail in, one of the ways to get it out is to tap on it from the other side.
Yeah. Instead of tugging from where you can't get the
can't get up.
You can't pry it out that way.
Yeah,
I know. But we always go to the source of power. How can I overpower this person to get them to do what I want, instead of how can I work together with this person so we both get what we want.
And it's exactly the same thing. Go to the source of the power within.
Yeah.
That we have.
Yeah.
Not that false power that's coming out fighting or being verbally, and not just, the words may not be ugly, but the tone may be. Yeah, and we got to go with the power that we have. Again, whenever I was I had this Sunday school teacher that was over the small children, and they would just be real rowdy, and being kids, being 4 and 5 year old kids, and being real rowdy. And she would be trying to get the lesson across, and she would. There would be maybe one child that was paying attention to what she was teaching.
Yeah.
And so she would sit down rather than being in a teaching position, She would sit down and she would take the book and she would start talking one-on-one to that one child.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden they go, well, what are they talking about?
I want attention too. Why is she
I want to hear that story too. And it was, I learned so much about running that department just by going in on occasion and observing that teacher teach those little kids.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
And it's just developing that relationship that whenever you begin to want the information, you're going to be open to it. And if I'm giving that information to one child, well, why isn't she telling me about it?
Yeah.
I want to know too. It must be pretty Must be pretty important.
Yeah.
Because first of all, they're not fussing at me because I'm climbing the walls.
Yeah, I'm not getting the attention I'm expecting.
Right.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is when you do something unexpected, it's like, I don't know how to respond in this situation. I don't know what to do because I'm not getting what I thought I was going to get. But if we could talk about it, if we could be open and say, hey, I just can't. You just talk such a monotone. It's so difficult for me. You go too fast, or you're not giving good examples that I can relate to. If we can have that communication and let people know really what we're looking for instead of just acting out on it.
Yes, that's very, very truthful. Very, very. Because I know one lady that she did speak. Well, I think her hearing, she thought she spoke loud. But from anyone that was hearing her, you could hardly hear you, and you'd have to really lean in.
Wow.
And, what she was saying was not the kind that you leaned into. But she was in that position, and it was, well, can you speak up? And she would just get really irritated because people were asking her to speak up. And so back to that being radically truthful, we need to begin to realize, what, people are constantly asking me to speak up or to repronunciate words. Maybe, just maybe, if I look in the mirror, I can realize that I am part of that problem.
Yeah.
And being radically truthful with myself, because listening to the information that others are giving to us, either of being afraid of us, or of asking us to speak up, or of saying, because, and it's radical truthfulness. And we have to start with being open to receiving those, what could be construed as a negative comment.
Yeah. We have to set the example. If we expect others to receive it from us, we have to receive it from others. We have to be able to. Yeah, they're going to see what you do and not necessarily what you say.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, some food for thought for this Monday, the last day in April. Can you believe that?
Right. Starting a new month tomorrow.
I know. So thanks, Mona, my co-host, for bearing with me on this today. And we'll sign off for this week, and we'll see you next week for another edition.
Right. Okay, sounds good.
Bye-bye.